what blockchain is SAVVA launching next? It's time for the first letter. It is M. M.
Let's reveal that second letter now.
Money? No?
Third letter is N. We now have M-O-N. Who thinks they know the word? There it is, an A. We have Mona.
Mona? Mona who?
Last letter is D. Monad! Monad!
Of course, monad. Mud. What else could it be?
All right, so today we're going to have an informative stream where we will dive into and thoroughly explore what exactly we are planning to do in the future. So for now, nothing has actually changed. Everything continues to operate just as it currently does. Today, I'll be sharing our plans. Therefore, we are officially declaring that we are going to launch the social network protocol for SAVVA on the Monad blockchain. And my task today is to explain where we are today, what's happening, and why we made this decision. So SAVVA is coming to the Monad blockchain. Onto the Monad blockchain. I'll just say a couple of quick words. Again, an unbelievable number of people have subscribed to our channel, so I must take a moment to briefly explain once more what exactly the SAVVA platform is. Just a quick overview. So the SAVVA platform is essentially a foundational platform upon which one can create and establish their very own social networks. The platform is entirely open source, meaning there's absolutely nothing you need to purchase. You just have to download the software we've developed, install it, and then anyone can quite easily set up their very own social network and become an integral part of this extensive SAVVA community. We have already launched and we've been operational for approximately 1 year now. Already there are quite a few social networks that have been built upon our platform. They exist and thrive successfully. It has attracted many truly wonderful content creators and lovely authors whom we absolutely adore and cherish. Conceptually, the SAVVA platform is founded upon two significant decentralized pillars, the first being blockchain and the second IPFS. So essentially all the content that you actually publish on the platform is physically located within a decentralized file system specifically known as IPFS. So it's not under the control of any single company, nor any one individual, nor even just one server. Instead, it resides within a global distributed file system spanning the entire world. And the registration of this content, which serves to verify and confirm the exact authorship of any particular post, is registered on the blockchain. And the entire SAVVA platform is built on these two decentralized ideas. So our network has actually been launched on a blockchain that is known as PulseChain. And today we are specifically discussing that. In addition to our current setup, we will also be launching on a new blockchain, which is known as Monad. So why Monad? Before we talk about why Monad, let's first, however, let's still take a little time to dive into PulseChain, and I'll explain exactly how we ended up on it and what the situation is like there today. So about PulseChain. Officially, it is indeed a layer 1 blockchain. Well, this project was officially unveiled and publicly announced in the year 2021, if I recall correctly. The founder of this PulseChain is a fascinating and rather eccentric individual named Richard Hart. And I'll be talking a lot about him today. In the year. Yes, it was announced in 2021, after which a donation round was held. I need to talk about this separately because it's an important story in the crypto world. The fact of the matter is, Richard came up with a truly brilliant idea, a method to ensure that any token you happen to issue wouldn't be subject to the complexities of securities legislation. This is a truly crucial matter. What exactly defines a security? Essentially, it's an asset whose trading is subject to an extensive array of restrictions and specific regulatory requirements. And in America, a special commission exists that meticulously oversees how these specific types of assets are to be sold. That's the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, who closely watches this. So, what exactly was the underlying issue? I'll explain this very briefly, as there's a wealth of information available online regarding this particular topic. However, it's crucial for us to discuss it now to fully grasp why we ultimately found ourselves on PulseChain, and so I'll quickly run through this entire story today. So, what exactly is the issue with launching a traditional ICO? What does ICO stand for? It's initial coin offering. This is when you attempt to launch some kind of crypto token and, try to attract investors to support your project. So you're essentially saying, hand over your hard-earned cash, transfer your financial resources to us, and in exchange, we promise to provide you with our upcoming tokens once they're released. In this model, unfortunately, you see the individuals who transfer funds to you for an ICO officially become your investors, because you're transferring them a token under your commitment, guaranteeing that these funds will be utilized for the construction of a specific project or for the initiation of some new system. Consequently, the funds the team received from investors will appreciate significantly in value. Thus, by transferring your capital to them, you anticipate realizing a certain return on your investment from it. And this entire scenario appears to be an investment in a project. And as soon as you have an investment in a project, you directly fall under these securities regulations. This means your project is immediately subject to stringent rules. And in reality, your life gets incredibly complicated because selling these types of tokens on crypto exchanges is strictly prohibited. It's simply not allowed. In reality, every single investor must be identified and information regarding them reported, meaning that all trading activities. Trading in this kind of token can only proceed under the strict oversight of the SEC and other such regulations. To steer clear of this kind of regulation, this specific regulation, Richard Hart devised a rather unique scheme, and in a sense, quite a remarkable one. He suggested something significant. He stated, we're going to try and interrupt this entire chain of promises. We will try to arrange it in such a way that it won't give the impression of being an investment in a project. Instead of a traditional ICO, he put forth the idea of conducting a donation round. This is precisely how it appeared. Individuals were prompted to visit a website and voluntarily donate their tokens, explicitly affirming and acknowledging that they were indeed relinquishing their tokens, their personal funds, with absolutely no expectation of receiving any return on their contribution. It's a strange setup, right? So people could come and say, I'm just donating, in support of freedom of speech. And I don't expect anything in return, no profit, and most importantly, I don't expect anyone to do anything for me with this money. And so, having received all those funds, Richard Hart, without promising anything to anyone at all, launches the blockchain. And to those who have contributed a greater sum of money, he allocates a larger quantity of these newly created tokens. And purely from a legal perspective, this no longer appears to be an investment. Thus, the token, by definition, cannot be legally qualified or categorized as a security. So that's the scheme he came up with, and that's how a donation round was conducted. And to everyone's astonishment, people donated a huge amount of money. According to the very same SEC's estimates, approximately $354 million were collected. Richard himself claims a much larger amount, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Nevertheless, it was still a tremendous sum of money that was raised, and in 2023, the blockchain saw a successful launch, and from that point forward, it's been working wonderfully and quite steadily, no complaints, the network is very stable and reliable. And at that time, we made the decision to launch our platform on the PulseChain blockchain. PulseChain for two significant reasons. Because for us, two particularly crucial principles were of immense importance. Firstly, from the very beginning, we decided we would build our project on EVM blockchains. Thus, EVM is the standard set by Ethereum. The real advantage of this particular approach lies in the fact that a vast number of blockchains actually support this very standard. And if you develop your project based on this particular standard, you are no longer constrained by being tied to just one specific blockchain. You get the ability to easily launch your protocol on different blockchains, which is exactly what we plan to do. Therefore, we truly needed EVM support. PulseChain didn't merely offer EVM support. It is practically a complete clone of Ethereum, so it has 100% support for this protocol. And the second thing that held significant importance for us was that the fees on this particular blockchain needed to be kept as low as humanly possible. So, as you are well aware, on EVM compatible blockchains, users are obligated to pay a particular fee for every single transaction they conduct within the blockchain network. At that particular time, transactions on the Ethereum blockchain were indeed extraordinarily costly. So for every transaction, you had to pay a pretty significant amount of money, sometimes $1, sometimes $5, sometimes $20. I had an instance where I paid around $500 in fees twice for a single transaction. It was a complex transaction. I had to upload a contract. This is a unique situation, but you still understand that the fee prices themselves are extremely high. It's evident that there's no sense at all in launching a social network if you anticipate that users will be charged $5, $3, or even just $1 for every single comment they decide to post. And when PulseChain launched, for us it was a big, huge stroke of luck, because the transaction fees on the PulseChain blockchain were thousands, yes, truly thousands of times cheaper than what you'd find on the Ethereum network. For us, it was a huge break. We decided to launch on that specific blockchain. So then what happened? Right, so what happened next? What exactly was PulseChain's technological novelty? It didn't really have a lot of technological innovations. The most intriguing aspect is, what brilliant idea did Richard Hart conceive? He devised a truly fascinating approach. He decided to launch a new EVM blockchain, not as a separate blockchain from a clean slate, but rather as a direct fork from Ethereum. This implies that once PulseChain went live, all the prior history residing on the Ethereum network was subsequently inherited by this newly established blockchain. Thus, all the wallet states, every single contract state, and indeed all the tokens that were present within Ethereum prior to PulseChain's grand launch, seamlessly and quite naturally became an integral part of the PulseChain blockchain's historical record too. And that was indeed the most fascinating concept that Richard Hart devised. Why was this interesting, you ask? Because no one could answer the crucial question: how would the value of these tokens perform once they were all duplicated on a different blockchain? At the time, absolutely no one had the answer to that query. Today, we finally know the answer. But back then it was interesting. Well, there were also some small, very minor, purely technological changes. The blockchain's block time, specifically the block production time, was altered. In Ethereum, it's approximately 14 seconds, and in PulseChain, it's around 10 seconds. These are not significant changes. I would not even label this as development. It is more like a network configuration, a slight adjustment. And there was a slight alteration to the mechanism for burning the base token during transactions. These were just minor technical adjustments, really, quite small changes. But in any case, it's a big, big project, a great success. The blockchain was launched. Now, the next extremely important aspect of this discussion is that, regrettably, this particular blockchain's standing within the crypto world is not very highly regarded. And that's primarily due to the reputation of Richard Hart himself. He is indeed a very peculiar character, having been in crypto for quite a long time. I remember him very distinctly and clearly, even from before the actual launch of the Ethereum platform. He was remarkably active and gained widespread recognition during that time, primarily for his fervent opposition to the concept of Bitcoin maximalism. Bitcoin maximalists are, you might say, a cult within the crypto space. They're individuals who firmly believe that in the entire crypto world, there's only one truly good token, Bitcoin, and everything else is just utter nonsense. And Richard very actively contested that specific point of view. And he was absolutely right about that. What I mean is, Bitcoin maximalism is truly a type of affliction, and it's something that absolutely needs to be combated. However, he always did things in his own unique fashion. He gained notoriety for various reasons, including quite lengthy live broadcasts in which he would vehemently denounce all Bitcoin maximalists with the most colorful language. He used to swear quite terribly, just like a sailor would. So, yeah. Well, he's quite a unique individual, especially after he received that enormous sum, that massive amount of millions, collected for the launch of PulseChain. Oh, I should mention that before PulseChain, he also had a very successful project, the launch of the Hex token. And during that period, I even had a brief exchange of messages with him on Telegram. It's not a very important story, but before the launch of Hex, Richard gave me the opportunity to examine the contract's source code. And because I had been writing contracts for quite a long time, even before Solidity was invented, I was, so to speak, permitted to see how everything was laid out there. Our correspondence with Richard was brief, you see, not long at all. And it truly doesn't matter because I don't know the man personally. My only interaction with him has been through Telegram messages. What I mean is, he's a very peculiar person. Once he had received that enormous sum of money, he completely got involved in utter nonsense. He became famous for buying a huge number of expensive watches and expensive clothes. He dressed like a clown, basically, in these expensive outfits, buying $20,000 handbags. Strange story, but by his primary specialization, his main profession prior to entering the crypto space, he was deeply involved in marketing. And well, perhaps if one were to consider all of this as merely a marketing campaign, then maybe it does in fact hold some kind of meaning. Well, you understand that the impression he was creating for himself in this particular way ended up not being very positive. Next, the Federal Securities Commission actually launched a criminal investigation into Richard Hart concerning the specifics of how this sacrificey process was executed and the propriety of how the funds were allocated. That lawsuit specifically dragged on for an exceptionally long duration. Oh, and what else? INTERPOL also initiated legal proceedings against Richard Hart, accusing him of sexual harassment. Overall, the situation is quite bleak. But in my view, the most crucial aspect is, of course, this rather deceptive method of carrying out these donation processes. For me personally, that's the absolute cornerstone issue that I, in general, just cannot accept. Cannot accept it. It truly seems to me like nothing short of pure deception. And just to mention, the SAVVA platform also has weekly donation opportunities available. So the idea itself truly isn't bad at all. In fact, our platform also features a special donations page where users can transfer funds. Each week, a substantial amount, I don't recall the exact figure, but it's around 240,000 SAVVA tokens is raffled off, and participants have the opportunity to win them. But it would never even cross my mind to personally engage in that process. I find it utterly immoral and deeply unethical because everyone who donates ultimately loses their money. If I were to donate, it would simply be moving money from one pocket to another. For this reason, I personally do not participate in it. Right. So, what unfolded next? Due to this rather unsavory reputation, regrettably, it must be conceded that the progress of the PulseChain blockchain, to put it mildly, very slow. The blockchain has been in existence for approximately 2 to 3 years now, actually 3 full years. But despite all of that, even to this day, no centralized exchanges are selling any of the Pulse tokens. No significant crypto players have adopted this blockchain. The most widely recognized protocols simply never even got launched on this blockchain. Regarding the question posed, do any tokens actually retain their value on this forked blockchain? The answer received is, they retain absolutely nothing. So, this entire narrative about inheriting the history from Ethereum. Ethereum's efforts yielded absolutely no results. The most interesting events, surprisingly, all revolved around the DAI stablecoin. If you know about it, there's this quasi-decentralized a stablecoin, and there was considerable optimism and a strong expectation that on PulseChain, on the PulseChain blockchain, which was a significant point of discussion, magically this token would also begin to, as it were, recover its peg, once again becoming worth $1, and that was the most intriguing part of the whole story. There was a tremendous number of people who had truly high hopes for this, eagerly buying up these tokens on PulseChain. Well, the contract was hacked on several occasions. People lost significant amounts of money and ultimately nothing positive materialized from it. And to be fair, Richard Hart very rightfully urged people not to get involved and not to expect any value from the DAI token and to stay out of it altogether. So thanks to him for that. Furthermore, not a single stablecoin, not even one, was successfully launched on PulseChain. To this day, there are no native stablecoins on PulseChain. There are stablecoins, but they are wrapped tokens from Ethereum that have been bridged over. Well, that's the story. So to this day, it essentially remains a highly marginal blockchain. And for individuals dealing with smart contracts on this particular blockchain, it is quite challenging to seamlessly transition their assets or an value into and out of a tokenized form. And the SAVVA token on PulseChain, many of the people watching me today who are users of our platform know how challenging it is to sell the SAVVA token and convert it into, say, fiat currency. It's all possible, everything's great, all the bridges, all the technology has been built. However, it still demands a complex multi-stage process for how to extract that value from the blockchain, and it's not a simple task. So that's the story. That's a bit of negativity about PulseChain. Now let me tell you the positive things about PulseChain. They exist. Well, to begin with, Richard has undergone significant changes quite recently. The primary point is he actually won the lawsuit against the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. He successfully hired outstanding lawyers. All accusations against him were dropped, and this represents a significant victory not only for Richard himself and PulseChain, but for the entire crypto world as well. It was demonstrably proven that he was indeed correct in his assertion that these particular types of tokens should not be officially classified or recognized as securities. And that's a huge win. Next, he's practically stopped swearing. For me, this is a significant indicator, as it genuinely reflects a certain, in a way, truly reflects a profound clarity of thought. Interpol also dismissed the sexual harassment allegations against him, so that wasn't true either. It's just that. We're past that, thankfully. That's quite important too. And he continues to work actively. He's launching a brand new project. It's called Provex. In my opinion, it's quite an interesting project, but unfortunately, my last and primary complaint about it, well, it still persists. In this project, he once again pulled his idiotic scheme with donations and deceived everyone yet again. So that's a part of himself he still needs to work on. What else is good about PulseChain? PulseChain has, unexpectedly for me, a pretty good community. Thus, Richard actually managed to attract a large number of people because despite his quite original personality and many quirky aspects, a lot of what he expresses is undeniably valid and quite reasonable. And he has a very good grasp of the fundamentals of how crypto works. And he successfully managed to gather such a community of individuals who, in my estimation, deeply comprehend the fundamental reasons for crypto's very existence and purpose. They're very active, always supporting each other. An immense number of projects have already launched on PulseChain, and more are continuously launching. I personally know of several fascinating projects set to launch very soon, some of which will include my involvement. This is probably the absolute best thing that's currently unfolding within PulseChain. And to properly conclude our discussion about PulseChain, I want to once again sincerely wish this blockchain good luck and hope it continues to exist. We are not leaving it, we are definitely continuing to support it. All the social networks on PulseChain are still running just as they were before. Today we're talking about the fact that we will be launching on yet another blockchain entirely independent of PulseChain. All right, let's circle back to our Monad discussion and delve into the reasons behind choosing Monad and, more importantly, how this entire Monad narrative diverges from the PulseChain story. So what exactly is Monad? Monad is one of the very new EVM blockchains, which was launched quite recently, actually, at the close of last year. And this is a completely different story. Well, first of all, it's a technological breakthrough. These are truly substantial and purely technological innovations that have made it possible for an EVM blockchain to achieve incredibly rapid speeds, making it exceptionally fast. The declared speed, that is the throughput capacity of the Monad blockchain, stands at an impressive 10,000 transactions per second. Just for a clear comparison, on the Ethereum blockchain today, there are approximately 7 transactions processed per second, whereas the Monad blockchain is capable of handling 10,000 transactions in the same time frame. How did they do it? They did it by implementing 2 absolutely brilliant ideas. I really don't want to get into the technical intricacies, but there are some things I have to explain because I find it incredibly cool myself. First of all, they implemented parallel transaction execution. Now, let me try to explain this to you very quickly and in a straightforward manner. When a new block is added to the blockchain, but what is a block? Simply put, a block is a list of transactions that must be processed. In Ethereum, transactions are processed sequentially. They cannot run in parallel. And the reason for that? Because any of these transactions could actually affect and change the state of the entire blockchain. And this implies that if you were to attempt to calculate those identical transactions in a different sequence, then consequently you would arrive at a divergent outcome. So, processing them in parallel, you cannot guarantee the exact order in which they are processed. This presents a fundamental problem. Consequently, all transactions within Ethereum are processed sequentially, making the system incredibly slow and cumbersome. And the second very important thing is that in Ethereum, the consensus itself is calculated based on the state of the network. That might sound a bit vague, but I'll try to explain. So we've processed all the transactions in our block, and they've changed the state of the entire network in some way. The whole blockchain has changed. A value changed here, a value changed there, something was added here, something was erased there. And the consensus considers the overall state of the network. So, to simply achieve consensus, to actually sign this block, to reach an agreement that this block is accepted by the network, it is essential to calculate all the transactions. The folks at Monad realized something incredibly interesting, a truly significant fact. They came up with a rather simple yet profound idea, that the consensus doesn't in fact require the complete state of the network. What exactly is consensus? It means all of us simply need to come to an agreement on the specific order in which we'll process these transactions, and the overall network state can then be computed at a later time. And there's a lot of sense in that because naturally, if we've agreed on the order in which we'll process transactions, then everyone who processes them afterwards will obtain the exact same network state. So we don't actually need to do the calculations. All we need to do is quickly agree on the order in which we'll process the transactions in this block. This was their first step. And secondly, knowing the order of these transactions, they actually implemented multi-threaded parallel execution, specifically for processing the network state involved in these transactions, in the following manner. There exists an optimistic approach, a truly unique algorithm that can be succinctly described as follows. We initiate the parallel calculation of all transactions, yet throughout this entire process, we continuously monitor if any conflicts emerge between these transactions. Should 2 transactions unexpectedly enter into a state of conflict, it is only then that we recall the specific order in which they were arranged, and as agreed, we re-execute them precisely in that sequence. And they were able to show theoretically that in the absolute worst-case scenario with this approach, you'd have to re-execute transactions twice at most. However, that would only be the case if you had an entire block of transactions, where all of them influenced each other, and you began processing them so unfavorably that you encountered every conceivable conflict imaginable within that block. However, even in this highly unusual scenario, it would still take at most twice the time to perform all the necessary calculations. However, in 99% of cases, most blocks contain absolutely no conflicts, because their transactions originate from various contracts that pose no interference to one another. And if conflicts do emerge, they are very minimal. Consequently, it has become feasible to implement parallel transaction processing, which accelerates the entire system's operations by tens of thousands of times. That's what the team had been working on for over a year. They conducted quite rigorous and extensive testing. They showed that all of this functions, and as of today, this system is already operating in production, and we observe it working phenomenally fast. Following this monumental technological breakthrough, they achieved a truly radical reduction in block times. Do you recall me mentioning Ethereum's block time is approximately 14 seconds and PulseChain's about 10? Well, with Monad, the block time is 0.4 seconds, so it's less than half a second for each new block. But even then, that's not quite the end of the story. The crucial point is that they managed to achieve full finality within just 2 blocks. Now, what exactly do we mean by finality? It's when your blockchain, a blockchain operates. I don't know how familiar you are with the theoretical underpinnings of this whole endeavor, but it's crucial to understand that sometimes in a blockchain, a situation arises where the blockchain rolls back. This means if you've made a transaction, it doesn't guarantee that the transaction will remain on the blockchain. A situation can arise on the network where that block is rejected and replaced by another one with a different transaction and potentially a different network state. That's why the term finality exists. It asks, when can a transaction be considered permanently settled on the blockchain? Just for reference, do you know what the finality time is in, well, Bitcoin? Now, for a brief interaction with the audience, if you know the answer, please raise your hand. Okay, in Bitcoin, the finality time is 1 hour. Because in order to genuinely guarantee that your transaction won't be reconsidered, that it won't be reevaluated by the blockchain, you need a minimum of 6 blocks. And each individual block in Bitcoin is typically mined once every 10 minutes. So, if you're, let's say, selling a car and you're accepting payment in Bitcoin, do not, under any circumstances, let your buyer leave for a whole hour after the transaction. After an hour, once you've observed 6 confirmations, your funds are then absolutely guaranteed to be in your account. Well, in the Monad blockchain, finality is reached after 2 blocks, which means it happens in 0.8 seconds. This is completely unheard of. Essentially, this means that on a blockchain like Monad, one can truly build a Visa-like payment system. You can just walk up to a cash register, you sign a transaction, and in less than a second, the seller is guaranteed that payment has been received, enabling them to release the goods to you. This is a truly unprecedented development for blockchain technology. While it's true there are other blockchain solutions that operate at comparable speeds, they invariably compromise on decentralization to achieve that performance. So there's this concept called DPoS. These are blockchains like EOS, where everything unfolds very rapidly, but the number of validators is quite small. So roughly 24 or around 20 validators quickly reach an agreement. Monad is built differently. Monad inherits full Ethereum decentralization, meaning it has a huge number of validators all over the world, and despite that, they managed to agree on the network state this quickly. So purely from a technological standpoint, it's an incredibly interesting blockchain. One last aspect, beyond the blockchains themselves, all interactive operations with the blockchain have been incredibly accelerated. We all know how it is when you publish on the SAVVA platform, you hit send post, and then you see a screen pop up that prompts you to sign your transaction. This is a common experience. And then the confirmation on the blockchain begins, and we have to wait there for 10 seconds, sometimes 30 seconds, depending on, different network conditions. What happens on Monad is truly unprecedented. You click to send a post, lift your finger, and almost in that very moment, the transaction is already complete, and your post is already accessible to everyone. So this is a completely novel, incredibly interesting technological solution, and you'll definitely want to experiment with it. You'll want to launch projects on it. Onward. Well, the Monad team has made sure to provide complete and robust support for the EVM standard. So, in hypothetical networks like EOS, they approached it this way. They cut corners. They didn't commit to full decentralization. Or, for instance, Solana is another example of such a system. They don't offer EVM compatibility. Instead, they opted to fundamentally alter the virtual machine to boost its speed. Monad didn't do any of that. Monad fully supports the EVM standard, which means that all protocols that previously ran on Ethereum or PulseChain can be very easily migrated to Monad. Essentially, you don't have to do anything. You can just upload the same contracts. And everything just starts working. That's a very good feature. Well, actually, that's one of the main reasons this Monad ecosystem is experiencing such incredibly rapid growth. This is one of the key reasons, and a vast number of protocols have already launched successfully on this very blockchain. And periodically, I receive notifications about yet another project announcing their upcoming launch on Monad, What we're doing today is also announcing that we also want to be on this blockchain to launch our protocol. Yes, it's about transactions, or rather the fee for each transaction. Given that throughput has surged by tens of thousands of times, this implies a substantial increase in the number of transactions contained within a single block. And this means that the blockchain can afford to drastically reduce the transaction fees. And right now, it's always like this when a blockchain launches. In principle, the fee is usually very cheap at first, so it might gradually increase later. However, at present, the transaction fees on Monad are even cheaper than on PulseChain, which makes it remarkably economical. So this is just completely for protocols like ours, it's just an absolute godsend. Currently, even with the network having just launched, it's already being supported by a vast number of established protocols, such as Uniswap, PancakeSwap, all these DEXs, and various lending protocols. A huge number of bridges have already been implemented from this blockchain to others. Chainlink, with its complete Oracle system, along with native stablecoins, are already fully operational on Monad, including both USDC and the new token Circle is currently issuing. And that in itself is truly a phenomenal outcome. From the perspective of crypto community backing, the Monad blockchain, despite having launched only a mere few months ago, has advanced incomparably further than PulseChain did over a span of 3 full years. Oh, and yes, all wallets are supported naturally, because it simply adheres to the EVM standard. RPC providers are fully supported, so if you need to run a Monad node, all these click node services are already up and running. Yes, Monad has been actively traded on centralized exchanges right from its launch. Prominent platforms like Binance, Coinbase, and Kraken have all successfully listed and are trading this token. There are no problems at all with moving value into and out of this blockchain. Why did all this happen so wonderfully? Well, it's a technological breakthrough, that's one reason. But there's a second reason that, in my opinion, seems even more important. Who is behind the funding for this project? The primary investor backing this project is a prominent venture capital fund named Paradigm. This is quite a significant story. Indeed, it's one of the most successful crypto venture funds in the industry. In fact, it's the formidable progeny born from the collaboration of 2 other prominent venture funds, Coinbase and Sequoia. These are exceptionally wealthy and well-established venture funds. The Paradigm Fund itself directly oversees approximately $3 to just over $4 billion, and it already possesses an exceptionally impressive track record. This is precisely the fund that provided funding for such prominent projects as Uniswap, Optimism, MakerDAO, Coinbase, OpenSea, and a great many more. And besides merely providing funding for all these projects, they have consistently demonstrated phenomenal profitability. For instance, their investment in the Uniswap project brought them a 70x return. This means they invested money to create Uniswap and subsequently earned 70 times more profit from that project than their initial investment. So these individuals possess the knowledge not just to finance a project, but also to successfully foster its continued development, its overall demand and widespread popularity. And all of this has been accomplished by this fund many, many times over. That's why I have high hopes that, with their assistance, the Monad blockchain will also succeed, and its rapid growth in popularity is already clearly evident. Thus, they injected a substantial sum, exceeding $200 million, into the advancement of this project. And it's quite amusing because that's even less than what Richard Hart managed to raise for PulseChain. But the results we are witnessing, what was achieved with those funds, truly represent a stark contrast. It's like night and day. And then, this last point here, I genuinely hope these individuals are adhering to the exact same strategy they've successfully employed with all their prior ventures, and will strive to guide this particular project towards a prosperous and thriving outcome. Story, you see. Currently, its market capitalization stands around their invested funds, approximately $300 million. This is not an investment recommendation, but I hold significant optimism that this blockchain will consistently gain more and more popularity. It truly has every justification for this. Technically speaking, it simply outpaces Ethereum, and not just Ethereum alone. It outpaces Ethereum along with all the layer 2 solutions built on top of it, creating a significant technological leap forward. and that's a very, very important indicator. So what exactly are we planning to launch on Monad? In a nutshell, we aim to deploy our entire protocol without any exceptions. The first and crucially important thing everyone needs to understand is that Monad will introduce its very own brand new native SAVVA Monad token. Why can't we use the old one? Because we can't have one blockchain be dependent on another blockchain. On Monad, all of our platform's functionality must achieve self-sufficiency. Therefore, we are compelled to introduce a completely new token, natively developed for the Monad blockchain itself. It will be called SAVVA.m, with the M for Monad. But it's actually quite an amusing story because, as many of you probably already know, the very name of the SAVVA token was conceived in honor of the renowned 19th century patron of the arts, SAVVA Mamontov. And so now we finally have SAVVA.m, which really brings to mind SAVVA Mamontov. So, looking ahead, if we continue to launch on various other blockchains, we could potentially end up with an entire family of tokens. A funny kind of family, where everyone has the same first name SAVVA, but all the last names will be different. Okay, we'll talk more about the tokens separately in a little bit. In addition, the entire protocol's functionality is being launched: staking, content registration, NFT support, and its very own governance system. Governance is also extremely important. This signifies that within the blockchain, as you know, governance on the SAVVA platform is not occupied with distributing any kind of funds or money. The governance on the SAVVA platform doesn't control any funds. There is no community fund, no development fund, none of that. I genuinely dislike that intensely. Any form of public financial oversight, in my opinion, just feels like an utterly misguided and incorrect approach. So what does governance do? Governance is able to conduct voting on network parameter changes. For the platform to work, there are several dozen very important parameters. For instance, what percentage of the fund contribution for a post does the author ultimately receive? Nobody knows what the right number is. Maybe it's 10%, maybe 5, maybe 15. And there's an opportunity. Through this unique governance mechanism, our entire network can collectively vote to change that specific value. All of this governance will exist separately on Monad and separately on PulseChain. Consequently, these platform operating parameters can indeed vary across different blockchains, which of course makes perfect sense, given the differing prices and varied demands. And, well, subscriptions, money collection, buy and burn, all the mechanisms, every single contract, completely 100% of all the contracts that currently run on PulseChain will be seamlessly migrated to Monad, with some slight modifications and enhancements to the core. I also need to point out that we absolutely took advantage of this opportunity to perform an additional thorough audit of all our contracts. We found a few minor adjustments, but absolutely no vulnerabilities or ways to exploit them were discovered in any capacity. However, as you understand, technology advances rapidly, the Solidity language itself is evolving, and therefore, some purely cosmetic adjustments were implemented in the contracts. Additionally, a thorough audit of all contracts was completed, and some functionality was also incorporated. Well, specifically, the ability to activate a gift subscription has been added, but let's not discuss that particular feature at this moment. Maybe we can talk about it separately sometime. What's important is that the fully functional protocol SAVVA will be operating on the new Monad blockchain. And I'll emphasize this point once more. PulseChain will continue its operations exactly as before, which is critical. The SAVVA platform, operating on the PulseChain blockchain, remains completely unaffected and indifferent to whether or not any projects are launched on other blockchains. It's totally separate. It will keep working just as it always has, so there's nothing to worry about there. Everything continues to work, people continue to make posts, everything is supported, the applications are fully functional across all social networks. There are no changes whatsoever. Yes, everything continues as it is. Moreover, we have no intention of changing or shutting down anything there. Everything will keep running as long as it's needed. It all functions perfectly. Moreover, even if we wished to halt anything there, we couldn't. The SAVVA platform consists solely of contracts, immovably embedded in that blockchain. They continue to operate, so PulseChain will now support the SAVVA platform indefinitely. Yes, so since a new token is appearing, then we need to immediately discuss the initial distribution of these tokens. Who is going to receive these tokens? How can one even acquire them? Look, for those of you who have been with our project for many years, and I know there are quite a significant number of people like that, they know that we genuinely cherish and deeply respect our token holders, and we would absolutely never ever try to deceive or in any way exploit them. Therefore, once we made this pivotal decision that we would be launching on Monad, we resolved not to print any additional batches of tokens to mint. And, well, you grasp that we potentially have the chance at this very moment to mint ourselves an additional package of tokens, to claim them, stating they are for the team or perhaps for the founder. We will absolutely not be doing any of that. With one important caveat, which I'll mention later. The core idea is this: everyone who currently holds SAVVA tokens on the PulseChain blockchain and who currently hold those tokens as staked assets, all such addresses will automatically be credited with the precise same quantity of tokens on the Monad blockchain as they currently possess in their staked holdings. You won't need to do anything additional for this. I'll now explain in detail how we'll be doing it. There are certain nuances involved. But now, allow me to make a very crucial observation, if you please. What I'm telling you now is the decision as it stands today. There's some activity, and theoretically, there's an extremely slim chance that we could potentially secure a partner, which, from within the Monad community, can significantly assist our platform in swiftly adapting and achieving widespread popularity. Should such a partner emerge, it's theoretically possible that we might be able to allocate an additional package of tokens specifically for that particular company or individual. However, if such an event were to occur, and if I personally determine that it would be truly advantageous for our platform, a situation like that, then, without a doubt, we will convene, and I will elaborately detail everything that transpires. But for now, the probability is low. Discussions are happening, but so far, it doesn't seem like enough. It still feels like insufficient support for our project. However, should such an event unfold, I will most certainly inform everyone well in advance of our official launch. As of right now, we have no intentions of doing anything of the sort. Therefore, the total quantity of SAVVA tokens that will be minted should ideally remain the same as what is currently on PulseChain. However, there will be a slight reduction, and I'll elaborate on the reasons for that shortly. So, let's delve into that discussion now. So, how exactly will this technically unfold? We will select a particular day, and on that very day, we will capture a snapshot of the blockchain's current state. This is commonly referred to in English as a snapshot. At a specific point in time, we will examine and record precisely which addresses have staked their tokens, noting the exact quantities. We will then meticulously save this comprehensive table of information for our future reference and use. And then, once we launch on Monad, we will conduct an airdrop and we will deposit the exact same quantity of tokens into those specific addresses. So if you have, say, 1,000 SAVVA tokens staked on PulseChain, no action is required from you. 1,000 SAVVA tokens will appear in your Monad account. But there are nuances. Yes, nuances. Before we get to the nuances, there's a second source. We have a fairly large amount of SAVVA tokens that are currently present in various liquidity pairs. We have liquidity providers who essentially make it possible for us to trade the SAVVA token. On the blockchain that is called PulseX, there are two distinct pairs. There are two active trading pairs, SAVVA with the stablecoin DAI and SAVVA with PulseChain's own native token, PLS. Those individuals who provide this liquidity will also be eligible for an airdrop. And this is a critical observation. Why? Because had we not established this stipulation, it would lead to a situation where, at the time we take the snapshot, people would entirely pull out all liquidity from exchanges merely to receive the airdrop, consequently stripping us of the overall capacity to trade the token whatsoever. I think that would have been quite a bad situation, honestly. Therefore, we'll proceed differently. All liquidity, just as it sits on the exchange, will continue to remain there. Instead, we will simply calculate which accounts are providing this liquidity and then grant them an equivalent number of new tokens, of fresh tokens. So, to obtain the new token, you will need to choose one of two paths. Either hold existing SAVVA tokens and then actively stake them within the designated staking contract, or, should your interest lie in contributing to liquidity provision, you have the option to deposit these tokens onto the exchange to serve as liquidity, and this action will equally grant you precisely the same quantity of tokens. SAVVA M on Monad. As of right now, we've roughly estimated that if a snapshot were taken today, approximately 168 million SAVVA tokens would come into existence. That's a bit less than the token supply on PulseChain. Why less? Well, because not all tokens are staked. There are quite a few liquid tokens and they weren't counted. It is clear that when we announce that we will be taking such a snapshot, I will naturally recommend that everyone who has any liquid tokens stake them for that period. You know perfectly well that you can unstake them at any given moment, but in order for them to be tallied, they will have to be held in a staked condition. There's another very important thing that needs to be explained. In blockchains, there are two different kinds of addresses. There are user addresses. These are the kind of addresses that you most likely have. These are addresses that possess a private key. You have an address and its corresponding private key, correct? And when you perform any operations, you sign them using that private key. These are normal accounts. Besides these, there are accounts on the blockchain that do not have a private key. These are contract accounts. A contract is essentially, it also has its own address. However, it's merely machine code that independently executes certain operations, so no signature is needed, and they don't have a private key. When we take the snapshot, we'll only consider legitimate, valid addresses, that is, user addresses holding their own private key. Addresses associated with smart contracts will not be considered whatsoever. Why is this important? There are two possibilities. I can identify two distinct scenarios where individuals could possess tokens within contract addresses. The first scenario is if you've established what we refer to as an NPO, a non-profit organization. In our system, as you know, you can create a public account, not a personal one. So this kind of public account is actually a smart contract. Consequently, tokens staked under the contract's name cannot be included in our snapshot. I will now explain why this is the case. And the second possibility, if you happen to have something like a multi-sig, that's a concept where a contract has multiple owners, you see. This situation does happen. For example, the SAVVA team itself has an account like this. When there's a particular address that is controlled and managed by several individuals, such an address will also be excluded. And if tokens are staked on its behalf, they will also not be included. So why won't they be counted? For a very simple reason. Because if we were to take them into account, we would have minted these new tokens directly onto the Monad blockchain and transferred them to those exact same addresses. But then no one would ever be able to access the tokens at those addresses because, as I explained, those addresses don't have any private keys. You see, the contracts themselves don't just move over. For this to happen, your contract needs to migrate to Monad, and crucially, to the very same address. And that is completely impossible. So, from a purely technical standpoint, it makes no sense to count such contracts. So what does this signify for you? It indicates that if you find yourself in a scenario where you possess an NPO account with SAVVA tokens, you absolutely must transfer those tokens to one of your actual personal accounts before the snapshot is taken. This is very simple to do. You don't need to unstake and then restake. As you probably know, on the SAVVA platform, you can easily transfer already staked tokens from one account to another. So it's a matter of 3 seconds. Just click and transfer. You just need to ensure you remember to perform this action. We will, of course, issue another reminder about this when we officially announce the specific date for conducting this snapshot. So here's a summary so we're all on the same page. If you have tokens staked from your account that has a private key, you're fine, everything will be counted. If you're providing liquidity on an exchange through your account, which has a private key, then you're all set. There's nothing further you need to do. If your SAVVA tokens are sitting there, but they're not staked, just in liquid form, then they simply won't be counted for the airdrop. If you want them to be counted in the airdrop, just stake them for that period. And finally, if you have tokens in some kind of contract, like a multisig or an NPO, you need to move them somewhere else for the snapshot. Next point. Besides just the tokens themselves, each of us also possesses another valuable asset, a registered name. For instance, my address is associated with the registered name Alexnan. It is, in principle, well-known information, so those who are interested can easily go and check how many tokens are in my account. This is all open information. We operate on a public blockchain, so all transactions and all balances are completely transparent. So, accordingly, when we move to, we aren't actually migrating. When we also launch on Monad, I would, of course, very much like to retain my existing registered name. Therefore, as part of the launch procedure on Monad, we have included the crucial step of registering these unique names. This means that if you have a name that is already registered on your user account, it will automatically be registered on Monad as well. Later, when you arrive and visit a SAVVA social platform on Monad, you will connect your wallet and be delighted to discover that your registered name still accurately and faithfully corresponds to your identity. However, it is crucial to understand that names currently linked to an NPO will not be migrated, as they would otherwise simply vanish and be irretrievable. Therefore, if you have any NPO with a specific name in the new blockchain, neither the NPO nor that particular name will be present. And this leads to a somewhat small conflict. It means, for example, if you have some wonderful NPO with some wonderful name, Vasya. After the Monad launch, this name Vasya will become unclaimed and remain entirely unused. And in principle, anyone could very quickly go and register that particular name for themselves. And a conflict will inevitably arise. This means that after some time you might wish to use your Navasyas on Monad, but that name will already be taken. We anticipate that such conflicts might indeed arise. Therefore, we have considered this thoroughly and reserved the right to perform this clearance for a certain period of time following the Monad launch. If, for some reason, you discover that a name you owned on PulseChain has suddenly been claimed by another party on the Monad blockchain, please reach out to us. We will establish a designated window of time, a specific period, within which we can effectively resolve this conflict and ensure your name is rightfully restored to your ownership. Once that window of opportunity passes and closes, we will no longer have the ability to perform these actions ourselves. However, this capability will still remain accessible for governance decisions. Thus, we personally will no longer have the ability to manipulate names. However, conflicts of this particular nature can indeed be resolved through a governance process. For example, let's all vote together to transfer this name to a specific address. If the entire network agrees, it will happen. Okay. Very important slide. Listen very carefully now, because this is important information. SAVVA is the new token that will be launched on another blockchain. At this moment, we are making absolutely no assumptions nor any predictions whatsoever regarding its potential future cost or value. There are no promises about that. My assumption is that it will essentially be worth next to nothing, because right after its launch, there won't really be any significant activity with our platform on that blockchain. No social networks are going to be launched right away after this either. The entire value of our new token will solely stem from the possibility that over time some individuals might anticipate its eventual use, leading to activity and prompting some peculiar individuals to begin acquiring it. My forecast, it will likely be worth very little after launch. The second very important thing. Furthermore, I have no assumptions or predictions regarding how this entire Monad launch situation will impact the price of the SAVVA token on the PulseChain. I repeat once more, the moment we launch it there, absolutely nothing will change on PulseChain. Therefore, I'm assuming that the price will likely remain exactly as it was, somewhere in that same range. Furthermore, prior to the launch, my personal assumption is this, and I bear no responsibility for it whatsoever. But let's just suppose that perhaps before the launch, the price might even rise. That's because some individuals will wish to acquire tokens on PulseChain solely to receive the airdrop. On Monad, it's clear, isn't it? If we want to participate in this airdrop, all that needs to be done today is to buy SAVVA on PulseChain and stake it. Then, after the airdrop occurs, when the snapshot is taken, you can withdraw those tokens and sell them if you don't need them. So that's also a possible scenario. So there might even be a short-term increase in the price of SAVVA. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not responsible for this. We don't control the price. So it's very important to understand today that we are not making any assumptions, any promises about the price of both tokens. We don't know. The market will decide all of this. Once the SAVVA token is successfully launched on Monad, then we will make it possible to trade it on an exchange. Most likely, no, not most likely. I know for sure it'll be right on Uniswap. You'll be able to trade the SAVM token on Uniswap. What will it be worth there? That's a mystery even to me. In any case, for all current SAVVA token holders, this will be additional value. It's the value of another token that will just materialize out of thin air and appear in their accounts. We will all watch this dynamic with great interest. It will be interesting. So what happens next? Again, there's a mistake here since this slide was prepared some time ago. The Monad mainnet has already launched. It's fully operational today. We are going to upload it there, and first we'll need to spend some extra time on additional testing. Currently, everything is launched and actively undergoing testing within the testnet version of the Monad blockchain, and I can affirm that everything is operating more or less successfully. We only needed to implement minor adjustments to get it all configured. This was primarily due to the incredibly rapid block generation on the blockchain, and because of that, we needed to adapt some constants. But everything is functioning, so we're planning in a little while. I think for a real assessment, we probably need another week or two to complete all the testing. After all that, we will officially announce the specific time when this crucial snapshot, this network snapshot, will actually take place. Most likely, we will not announce a precise date. There are several good reasons why it's not ideal to disclose an exact date, as doing so could potentially allow for manipulation of the entire process. So we'll probably announce that the snapshot will happen within the next 3, 4, or 5 days. We just won't say exactly when. After that event, when it finally takes place, we will then receive a comprehensive and detailed list for this specific airdrop. And then, after that, and hopefully after a not too lengthy period of time, we will finally be able to launch all the contracts on the Monad mainnet blockchain. We'll check everything again and conduct the airdrop, then we'll check everything once more. We'll make it possible to trade the new token. And subsequently, we'll announce the official launch of the platform. Once that's done on Monad, there will be solely one social network operating, specifically SAVVA.app. That very one, which is dedicated in essence to the platform itself. And it's through this social network, SAVVA.app, you'll have the ability to view your wallet status, and you'll be able to perform staking, unstaking, and similar actions. And following that, the most exciting part will commence. The endeavor to seek out individuals keenly interested in potentially launching compelling social networks on the Monad platform. And in that sense, the process is also underway. I really hope that at least one interesting network will appear there. So, if any of you have interesting ideas and wish to share them, if you have any ideas on what theme or subject to launch a network, then please just let me know. If you find this interesting, I would be more than happy to assist you in setting everything up and getting it all operational. So, yeah. Well then, I believe I've covered all the information I intended to share. Please make sure to subscribe to all our channels and keep an eye out for further announcements. All right, so now, if you'll indulge me, I'll go through all the comments and attempt to answer the questions you've posed. Whoa, there are a lot of comments. All right then. Let's take a look now. Everyone who receives the airdrop will be required to acquire a small amount of Monad as an additional purchase. Ah, that's right. In order to cover the transaction fees on the Monad network, you will indeed need to use Monad for payments. However, at this very moment, there are some really great things. There are some truly wonderful things that can help make that happen. First off, whenever you transfer any tokens, no matter what they are, across the bridge for the very first time to any given account, the bridge that handles those token transfers to Monad will, at this moment, automatically provide one Monad completely free of charge to each and every one of those accounts. Well, that's not a huge amount of money, but since the fees are so incredibly cheap, it truly lasts for a very, very long time. So once you've got your zero address set up there, simply transfer anything you want to it. For instance, just one USDT. Any token you want to transfer there. And in addition to that token, you'll also immediately receive one Monad, so you can start doing things with it right away. That's a good system. Okay, next. Following the SAVVA launch, should content creators decide where to publish their work next, or do you recommend they duplicate their posts across both parallel networks? That's a question. Hello there, Igor. This question comes from Igor, who is the administrator of the Periscam website. That's actually a question specifically for you. Look, the situation is as follows. Once we successfully launch the protocol on the Monad blockchain, nothing will change for the Periscam website. It will continue to function exactly as it always has. Therefore, the content creators on Periscam won't have to make any decisions whatsoever, because everything for them will remain exactly as it was before, with no changes needed. But, as the administrator of the Periscam network, you yourself have the autonomy to make a decision at some point. What you'd like to do with that website. You could then just say, hey, I can launch Periscam on Monad as well. What you'd like to do with that website. You could then just say, hey, I can launch Periscam on Monad as well. You don't necessarily have to decide to migrate somewhere. You can just do it that way at some point. It would look like this. People will come to Periscam and they'll see a blockchain icon at the top. Currently, they have PulseChain prominently displayed there, but a little shield icon will appear and you will be able to click on it and select Monad instead of PulseChain. And that's when the authors will face the question, where should they publish? And that is if you decide to take that step. After that, you yourself can, so to speak, keep track of how much activity there is and where. And perhaps, purely theoretically, after some time you'll say, well, listen, all my authors have already somehow decided to publish on the Monad blockchain. It's easier for them to withdraw money there, all that business, and nobody's really publishing on PulseChain anymore. And at some point, as the site administrator, you can yourself decide, well, perhaps PulseChain no longer interests me, we won't be supporting it anymore, and simply remain on Monad. And in that smooth way, you'd migrate your own social network from one blockchain to another. That's a question you should be asking the administrator of that specific website, not me. You can make that decision entirely on your own. We've truly gone to great lengths to help you arrive at that decision yourself. For instance, a feature is already implemented today, enabling any author to migrate all their content from one blockchain to another with just a single click of a button. So that feature is already implemented. You just can't see it yet, but it's active in our test environment. So, for example, let's consider this scenario again. At some point, you made the decision that both networks would be available to you. Authors can open on either blockchain, this one or that one, and everything will function simultaneously. At any moment, an author might say, you know, I'm not really finding PulseChain that convenient. I want to reside on Monad. They'd navigate to their settings page, where they'll find a button labeled something like Backup and Restore. The ability to save all their posts from the PulseChain blockchain, then switch over to Monad and simply say, all right, send all of them over here. And with just a single click, all the content, all the entire collection of posts that were initially on PulseChain will automatically appear within Monad. And what's more, with the correct dates, as if they had been publishing there on Monad all along for their entire lives. So this migration feature is already planned, it exists, and it's even been implemented. But again, all of this activity doesn't depend on me, it depends on the network administrator. And regarding what I recommend, my main suggestion is simply this: there's no need to rush. Hold on, we haven't even launched yet. We need to launch first, make sure everything works, see how convenient it truly is. Then, we can discuss and observe how much easier it might be to work with the Monad blockchain than with PulseChain, especially for you living in Paris. These are all highly specific questions, tied directly to your particular region and the jurisdictions under which you operate and live. If you decide for yourself what is truly better, then all opportunities become available to you, such as switching to a multi-network support mode and, for example, continuing to operate in that mode indefinitely. That is certainly one of the viable options. Or, for example, at some point you might say this network is no longer of interest to us, and we've specifically switched to this other network. It's a dynamic situation that we'll all be watching. Again, if I can give a recommendation, definitely don't rush. I'm always very tense about it. We're just launching something, and since it's a new environment, a brand new blockchain, some things might not work as expected. Let's wait and see, convincing ourselves it's all working well and reliably. The SAVVA app social network will exist on both networks simultaneously. The SAVVA app will operate in this mode right from the very beginning. It will simultaneously support two blockchains, allowing you to commence publishing and monitor how everything operates. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that all our applications already support all blockchains right now. Therefore, should a new blockchain suddenly emerge on Monad, you will immediately be able to connect to these networks from within all of our applications, whether on iPhone or Android, allowing for seamless integration. And everything is already working. It's all been tested and it all works great. All right, so what else is there? Could you please elaborate on the process of establishing a new community on the SAVVA platform? What are the requirements to create such a community? Look, I genuinely perceive the SAVVA platform, or SAVVA as it's known, as fundamentally a technological project. What we're engaged in is writing code, and we're enabling people to utilize this very software code, providing that opportunity. The platform itself, in its essence, doesn't spontaneously create communities. It cannot generate any communities from scratch on its own. On the contrary, the situation is quite the opposite. First, a person or an entity has already cultivated a community, a group of interested individuals, a collective who are keen on exploring a specific subject matter or topic. And they decide for themselves that for this community, they can implement the ability to have their very own social network where they could post, support one another, and fully realize that entire social dynamic and all its potential. Therefore, how to establish a new community is not a question for the platform itself, but rather a matter of one's personality. For example, there's our beloved Igor Smirnov, who organized Paris Camp. How he creates that community is a mystery to me, but he is surrounded by an unbelievably immense number of phenomenally interesting people. That's definitely not a credit to SAVVA platform, but to Igor Smirnov. Well, there are also other examples. But if the question was more about the technological aspect, specifically how to actually get this network up and running, the simplest way is this. We have detailed documentation. As you know, every site offers documentation in many different languages. Or rather, you can open it up, and within it, you'll find a dedicated section detailing precisely how to go about launching your very own SAVVA network. It is quite detailed. It specifies what needs to be installed, what steps are required, and the precise method for setting it all up. And today, we all possess an absolutely remarkable assistant at our disposal, artificial intelligence, which I strongly encourage everyone to utilize. It phenomenally simplifies solving these types of problems, these kinds of tasks. So if you were to implement something like Anthropic's Claude Code, feed it the URL containing all the documentation, and then assign it the task, please read through all this documentation and help me set up my very own SAVVA network. You would be astonished. It will most likely do all that work for you and simply tell you exactly where to go, what needs to be done, and how to set everything up. The latest news from the world of artificial intelligence is just mind-blowing, so I highly recommend using it. It will help you answer all your questions. By the way, regarding that, we have an official SAVVA app Telegram channel. This discussion group came into existence. A group for public discussion was formed, providing an opportunity for open dialogue. And among the participants in this discussion, one of the members is our lovely robot named Alice Barrymore is her name. That's how I came up with her name. At first, the story behind it is quite amusing. I initially named her Barrymore, just like the famous character from Sherlock Holmes, that very efficient and dedicated butler, you know. But then, when she spoke to me in a female voice, I just found it somewhat more pleasant to imagine her as a girl. And so I posed a question to her saying, if Barrymore had a daughter, what would her name be? After a thorough and extensive analysis of names popular during that specific era, she herself decided to be named Alice. Alice, that is. So, Alice Barrymore is the girl you can actually ask questions to today, right now. She's available in the public chat on Telegram. In the public chat on Telegram. And the absolute brilliance of the current state of AI is that it's not some empty shell that's merely programmed to provide silly answers to silly questions. And this young lady, Alice, she possesses full access to the entire code base of every program that forms the SAVVA platform. This encompasses both the application and all the associated contracts. She can also meticulously assist you with resolving technical inquiries. Furthermore, she has been trained to inform me if these discussions reveal any need to rectify or enhance anything within the code. In such cases, we will promptly address and implement the necessary corrections and improvements. Therefore, I highly recommend leveraging this feature. Okay. All right. What else do we see? How much monad is needed to operate on the network? Very, very little indeed, I tell you. I mean, that single monad which will materialize out of thin air for you absolutely free will be quite sufficient for a very long time for... Well, once again, the transaction fee currently stands at, I believe, 4 zeros. 0.000 something of a dollar, roughly speaking. There you go. And 1 monad costs, I forget. 1 monad costs. Well, you can look it up. Okay. PLS needs to be converted to SAVVA tokens and then put into staking. Yes, if you wish to, if you have made the decision, not that it's mandatory, but if your desire is to convert your Pulse tokens into SAVVA tokens and subsequently stake them, then indeed, that is something you will need to proceed with. This can be accomplished in a very straightforward manner. You can simply go to the PTZ exchange. That is indeed an aggregator. It's akin to something like 1inch on Ethereum, which is basically an aggregator for DEXS. It is a kind of website, an aggregator of decentralized exchanges that will find you the absolute best price for converting your tokens. Following that, you can convert your Pulse into SAVVA tokens right there on that particular exchange. This site already knows about the SAVVA token. It's registered with them. So you simply type in SAVVA and you will definitely see it appear there. And just an important disclaimer, don't ever forget that PLS is the foundational token on the PulseChain network, so you shouldn't convert all 100% of it. Because if you convert 100% of your Pulse to SAVVA, you won't be able to do anything else on the network. You won't have enough tokens to pay for transactions, so always keep a certain amount of Pulse in your account to ensure you can function within the network. Yes, and after that you can simply stake those tokens on any of the SAVVA platform's numerous websites, on any of the available web platforms. You just go into your wallet and you'll find a stake button there. That's it. Once you see that your tokens are staked, you don't need to do anything else. You simply wait for Monad to launch and you will have exactly the same amount of tokens there. Okay, what makes it fundamentally different from other social networks on the blockchain? How is SAVVA different from other social networks? Well, it's a complex question. Firstly, there aren't all that many social networks out there operating on blockchains. There's an extensive history of blockchains and more specifically social networks that have successfully emerged from and developed within the Steemit blockchain platform. These are blockchains that Dan Larimer created. Dan Larimer. Larimer is an absolutely remarkable individual who has played a profoundly positive and impactful role in the general development of crypto. He then created iOS, which too introduced a great deal of innovation. And then there were many different narratives that developed over time. Currently, all of this operates as part of the HIVE blockchain. Right, these are those very kinds of social networks. And yes, by the way, this is a prime example of the social networks from which, if you recall correctly, we once collaborated with their clone, which was specifically developed for the Russian audience and bore the name Cyberway. Such social networks have existed for many years. They are quite successful in their own right, but we distinctly differ from them, both in the tokenomics we've implemented and in our entire technological structure. I'd probably rather not give a whole other lecture right now on how we're different. However, one of the fundamental aspects is that they all operate within a specific time frame, a designated window, during which a particular post can accumulate a certain quantity of rewards. Maybe a week, 10 days, I don't remember exactly, maybe 2 weeks. And after that, everything you've published will no longer accrue any further rewards or recognition ever again. On our platform, there's no fixed time frame. A quality post at any given moment, even if it was originally published, let's say a year ago, if it resonates with an audience, if it catches a reader's interest, it can continuously generate profits at any time. Well, that's probably the most crucial distinction. But I reiterate, technologically, we operate on a completely different kind of blockchain, an EVM blockchain. That in itself is an entirely separate matter. All right, well, we've probably gone on for quite a while here. I'm just checking. I haven't missed any questions, have I? Besides the SAVVA and PLS tokens, will there also be a MON token? Look, on the PulseChain blockchain, the SAVVA token and the PLS token will remain just as they are. And on the Monad blockchain, there is the MON token, which is their base token, and the SAVVA token will be introduced as well. So there will be 2 tokens on each chain. Well, I believe I've probably covered all that I possibly could, and I think I've responded to all the questions then. Well then, I believe we should conclude our session for today. Thank you all very much for joining. We've experienced a phenomenal surge in the number of subscribers on our channel. I truly believe we've surpassed 13,000 already. Indeed, 13,300 people. That's just absolutely phenomenal. Thank you all so much. Please stay tuned for upcoming news. We are definitely moving forward.